Well, good afternoon, or evening, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Rodney Crosby, and it's a real pleasure to join with all of you and welcome you to our second 2022 King Yoga event entitled Our True Purpose on Earth. And we're streaming today live from our Aetherius Society temple in Hollywood, California. So this is the home, was the home, of our founding yoga master, Dr. George King, where he lived and taught for many, many years. So we're very excited to be here with you today, and thank you for joining us today. I think it's going to be a fantastic afternoon. So I'd like to start by talking about the topic. I think this is a fantastic topic, especially during these very confusing times, our true purpose. And discovering our true purpose, is there anything really more important? I don't know if there is. I think that for a lot of us, finding our true purpose is central to who we are, and it's certainly central to our happiness. And I think for a lot of us, it's something that we start thinking about when we're very, very young. I know for myself personally, that did happen. I remember at the age of 5 or 6, praying frequently to be shown my path and my true purpose. And fortunately, my prayers were answered, because here I am at the Aetherius Society. But it also reminds me of something that the famous comic Jim Carrey said that I really love. He said, "I wish that everybody could get rich and famous and have all of their dreams fulfilled so that they can see that that's not the answer." And I think that's central and core to what we're here for today, which is discovering our true purpose. And, before we get into presenting the rest of today's topics, and before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to do a brief recap on King Yoga, what King Yoga really is. Now, King Yoga is the name of the spiritual path that we gave to the Aetherius Society. And it's named in honor of our founding master of yoga, Dr. George King, and also in honor of the teachings that came through Dr. King and the many masters who communicated through him. And King Yoga is comprised of 3 main elements. The first being cosmic wisdom. Now, this is the wisdom of Dr. King, as well as the over 600 channeled teachings, which we call transmissions, that were delivered through Dr. King as a very advanced yogic medium. The second main aspect of King Yoga, of course, is spiritual practices, something that I think many of us enjoy very much. I certainly do. It's one of my favorite aspects of King Yoga. And of course, spiritual practices are designed to do what? They're designed to help us purify ourselves so that we can become pure channels to send out love and healing to the world, which is really what the world needs. And the third and most important aspect of King Yoga, of course, is service to the world, or Karma Yoga. And Dr. King and other masters did say that Karma Yoga is the most important yoga in these days, because the world needs it more than ever before. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to talk about King Yoga. And I also want to talk about the main difference between King Yoga and the other major yogas. Of course, the major difference is King Yoga is designed to help humanity as a whole, whereas the other yogas in the past were primarily designed to help the individual. So King Yoga is all about Karma Yoga, and George King was a Karma Yogi. So let's talk about our presenters today. We're very fortunate to have with us the Reverends Paul Nugent and Lisa Rosser. And of course, many of you know both Paul and Lisa, but a brief bio on both of them. Paul first came to the Aetherius Society in 1986 in London, and he's been practicing and teaching King Yoga ever since. And Paul has also been a personal aide to Dr. King for many years, especially during the latter years of Dr. King's life. And Paul was invaluable in helping our master, and also learned many things about King Yoga from Dr. King personally during those years. Now, Lisa, I'm happy to say, has recently relocated to Los Angeles. Lisa has been practicing King Yoga since 2012, and she has practiced and taught King Yoga really all over the world because she comes to us most recently from London. She and her husband Julian, being in London for 3 years. Prior to that, 4 years in New Zealand for Lisa, and prior to that in Michigan. So we are very happy to welcome her to Los Angeles to help us with our efforts in King Yoga. And today's format, very briefly, Paul and Lisa are going to give us about a 45-minute presentation in a lecture format with some extracts from the transmissions I mentioned. And after that, there's going to be a short break, after which Lisa and Paul will come back and guide us through a spiritual practice, which is designed, I think, and I hope, to help us find our true purpose or rediscover our true purpose. Right? And sometimes it's one and the same thing, if you think about it. So it's my pleasure to give a warm welcome to the Reverends Paul Nugent and Lisa Rosser.
Hello, everybody. And hello, everybody tuning in online. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And talking about, as Rod mentioned, the most important thing we can talk about, our true purpose on earth. It's the most important question that we can really ask. And as Rod already mentioned, the information that we're going to be sharing with you today has come from Western Master of Yoga, Dr. George King, who was a master of many yogas, not just Hatha Yoga, but Mantra Yoga, Mudra Yoga, Agni Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, among several more. So he's quite an advanced master, and we're very lucky to be able to have the teachings that we have from him. And hopefully, after the event today, you feel that you're walking away with something, at least a next step for you to find your true purpose, which may feel like the first step. So that's what we hope for you today. So Paul, can you please tell us what our true purpose is?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Rodney, and thank you all for being here. Well, that's what we're going to talk about, what our true purpose is on Earth. Although in saying that, I'm reminded of when I was obviously a lot younger. And I think that it was something that was very different for myself and my brother. For me, because we're all kind of set out, certainly as young men, to go out and have a career and build a family and, in that way be successful in life. And so that's how we both started out. But I think it was very compelling for my own brother to be that way. And that is exactly how he lived his life. To all intents and purposes, he was successful. He had a good career. He got married. He had 6 children, and almost lived happily ever after. Poor chap, unfortunately, died just a few months ago. But that's another story. But for me, that wasn't quite enough. As I say, I set out in that way. But there was something that was sort of burning and stirring deeper within me that was not enough. And I think that when it comes down to it, I think that we all actually do share this same profound, true purpose for being on Earth. And it may take us lifetimes to really come to terms with that and make that the main focus of our own life, which brings in karma and reincarnation, which of course we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it was Socrates who said, an unexamined life is a wasted life. And I think it's a profoundly true statement, and it reminds me a little bit of the wonderful Buddhist teaching, I think Tibetan Buddhist teaching, that describes what an incredible gift and how rare it is to have this life, this incredibly precious life that we all have. They liken it, in terms of its chances of happening, believe it or not, to a one-eyed turtle. And there probably aren't very many one-eyed turtles, but anyway, a one-eyed turtle swimming across the ocean and surfacing, not just surfacing but on its own, but actually surfacing through the floating yoke of an ox that just happens to be sort of going across the ocean at exactly the same time as this one-eyed turtle comes to the surface. And I mean, obviously the chances of that are incredibly unlikely and rare, but at the same time it sort of helps us to understand how precious this experience of life is and how important it is to really use this time to find out our true purpose. And I think that you can be like my brother and have that life, but underneath it, and I think it was actually important as my brother grew older to find that true purpose in life.
And I think while we're all looking for our true purpose, it's important that we use our intuition, not just do something because it feels good, but do something because it feels right. And I think probably all of us have to make these determinations from time to time. We are going to be introducing some possibly new terminology. The purpose of life, as Dr. King tells us, is to raise Kundalini. So we'll talk about what Kundalini means. We'll also talk about karma and reincarnation. And in the Aetherius Society, we believe that these are inseparable. They're peanut butter and jelly. They go together, and because karma has a bit of a negative connotation, but it's not a punishment. It's a teacher, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. And most of us, I would say, cannot balance all of our karma in one lifetime. We need a few more.
Yeah, we certainly, we apparently do.
I do.
We apparently do. Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned there, I mean, the word Kundalini. What Dr. King told us in terms of King Yoga and our true purpose in life is to raise this force known by its Sanskrit name of Kundalini. It's a force that we all have, a driving force, a motivating force. That we all have at the base of the spine, in the chakra or psychic center, at the base of the spine. And our purpose for being on earth, why we reincarnate, why we keep coming back, is to raise this force of Kundalini up through each of the psychic centers, the chakras. So we have, as I say, the base of the spine. The next one goes by different names. I think here it's probably called the sacral center. Hopefully those of you who are watching this online are able to see a slide. Then up to the solar plexus center, round about the navel. And unfortunately, this is pretty much where I suppose most of human beings currently are. But we're here to raise it above that, obviously, into the next one being the heart center, when we start to open our heart and become, I suppose, more compassionate, more tolerant, more empathetic or empathic, more empathic human beings. And then, but even beyond that, up into what's the throat center, which is leading into the aspects of higher mind, tapping into our higher mind. More solar plexus is more sort of basic instinct. And then the Christ center, sometimes called the third eye, and then ultimately the crown chakra above the top of the head. And that is our purpose for being, our primary purpose to be here, which is at the same time you could say to evolve. Yeah. We're here above everything to evolve, to attain our true and full potential.
And we do have an extract a little later on where Dr. King is talking about raising Kundalini. In line with this purpose being raising Kundalini, Dr. King, we mentioned earlier, was a channel for many cosmic masters. One cosmic master named Mars Sector 6 gave a series of teachings in 1961 called the 9 Freedoms, which we have here. And in this 9 Freedoms, there's a series of steps. So it's one thing for us to say, well, we need to raise Kundalini, but how do we do it? So the first few steps in this book, or gates that we have to go through, are the first freedom is bravery. And everything that we do on the spiritual path will require some form of bravery. Coming here today, stepping out of your comfort zone to learn something new, it takes bravery. The second freedom is love, and this is the energy love, not just the emotion that we feel, but the energy, and it's learning how to use this energy properly. And that will help us in the third freedom, which is service, which is what we're all here in the Aetherius Society. We really believe in service to humanity is the best way that we can help ourselves and others evolve, really. And that leads to the fourth freedom, which is enlightenment, which is what you become once you've raised this Kundalini.
Absolutely. And because service, I mean, on the whole, people don't want to really serve. I think service is the natural reaction or follow on from love. And I think that love is a natural follow-on from bravery, because that initial bravery is honoring one's own inner voice, one's own intuition, one's own higher conscience, which does take bravery. But what is behind that is love. And when one does develop that sort of feeling of compassion for the whole world, particularly as the world is today. In fact, saw a bumper sticker the other day which said, "If you're not appalled, you haven't been paying attention," which is exactly true. And I think that when we do start to care and care profoundly about the way we're living on this world, we do want to do something about it. So we're going to hear an extract?
Yes, our first extract is from the fourth freedom. It's Mars Sector 6, who we presume is from Mars. And this is him talking about the fourth freedom, enlightenment.
The freedom, enlightenment, is the fruit which can be cultivated in the spiritual garden of terrestrial man if he tends it with sufficient care, sufficient kindness, sufficient patience, sufficient tolerance. If he tends it with intelligence, if he tends it by manipulating his karmic pattern through the right service, this will grow, will blossom, and will bear all fruits.
I think that's a really interesting extract. Something that stood out to me is that Mars Sector 6 talks about manipulating our karmic pattern. And again, this manipulating karma sounds like it's got a bit of a negative connotation, but it's everything you do manipulates your karma. If you do something good, you're making good karma. So it's not the punishment that we previously thought of, where if you step on somebody's toe and then somebody will step on your toe and then you've learned not to step on somebody's toe. It's a personal story for Paul recently.
Well, it is actually, because I did tread on somebody's toe, believe it or not. And a few days later, which actually I've still got, I've got this really bad back. I whacked myself in the face with a hammer, believe it or not. And I also walked into a sort of wooden post and banged my head. So, I mean, in a way, that is, how karma does operate. But yeah, I mean, we are manipulating our karmic pattern all the time. And I think, in a way, in Mars Sector 6 there, he also gives us the right way to do it with sufficient care, sufficient kindness, sufficient tolerance, and perhaps most important of all, though those are very important aspects to it, but the right kind of intelligence, being aware of what our intuitive higher self is telling us, and when we do that, and when we do apply that conscience or that inner voice, the bravery, then we will be manipulating our karma in the right way that is helping us, literally to evolve.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And I think it's that learning your intuition and tapping into it takes time and takes practice, and we'll have hopefully a nice contemplation later on to help you kind of find your next steps. I think that brings us to our second extract. So this is from 1961. It's a lecture from Dr. King on the first freedom. And this is Dr. King talking about what it's like to raise Kundalini for the very first time.
About the third eye, which is
Right
the
here.
Christ center, and for the image on the screen, it's the purple psychic center.
Certain stage where you first look through the third eye, or the Christ center, we choose to call it. And this is the most awful, terrifying experience of your life. And it is true. In the name of heaven, my friends, it is true. You will go mad. You will probably end up by committing suicide, or you will be brave enough to go forward. Now, whosoever tells you different has not had this experience. I don't care whether he calls himself Swami XYZ or Master QFZ. He has not had that experience if he tells you different. The first time you look through here, you see yourself alone in the universe. Completely alone. Now, I don't know whether any of you have been completely alone, stuck up on a mountain or somewhere. That's one thing. But to see yourself completely alone in the universe is something worse, something terrifying, a great test, a challenge. So, right throughout our spiritual evolution, bravery is an absolute essential if we are to go on. Not foolishness, but wise bravery, a kind of a steadfastness, is absolutely essential to all people.
It's quite an interesting extract, because if our true purpose is to raise Kundalini, you would expect, once you've done that, it would be this wonderful, joyous occasion. But instead, I think it shows how these first freedoms, bravery, love, and service, will give us the experiences that we need to prepare ourselves for this event so that we can raise it again.
Yeah, again, I mean, I would have to agree with that, obviously, but I think that, in the Nine Freedoms, the Mars Sector 6 does begin by sort of says, bravery is essential in all things. And I remember, he talks about the sort of steadfastness. I mean, in my own personal case, when I was that young man and my brother was heading off with his career and I was sort of stalling with mine based on, profound questions. But it was important for me. It was most important. It was compelling for me to respond to that inner voice, that voice of conscience. It was more important than anything. And the consequence of that is that it did separate me at the time from my crowd of friends. And I remember I was sharing a house in London with two very old friends from school. And I needed to move out. I mean, as good friends as they are, and they're good friends this very same day, which shows what good friends they always were. But I needed to take myself to a place of seclusion. So I actually sort of moved into a flat on my own so that I could develop myself in that way. And so it does take loneliness, if you like, you have to take yourself away from your norm if you're going to really sort of begin to take this path seriously.
Step out of your comfort zone.
Right. I mean, of course, traditionally in the past, people would go literally into absolute seclusion. They'd go into a cave or a monastery, at least. Sometimes monasteries where they didn't talk to each other. From 1 year to the next. Which is not how it is now because of the urgency of our times. But yes, I mean, it does take this loneliness. But in that, when one is brave enough to honor one's true voice, one's true conscience, I think it does bring about a confidence and a knowledge that one is on the right path.
Absolutely.
An intuitive, as you're saying, but it's not what feels good, but what you know is the right path to take. So I think that yes, when one has developed and prepared oneself in the right way, you are alone. And Dr. King says that we are completely alone in the universe. It's a little bit, I think is one way I sometimes think of it, is as a grain of sand in an egg timer. And it'll come a point where it is our moment to cross through that egg timer into the great unknown of the other side. Yeah. But if one's been paying attention and prepared oneself, in the right way, it will be a glorious step, and we'll never go back.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the right steps. So now that we know our true purpose is to raise Kundalini, and we have these steps that we can learn and we can practice, bravery, love, and service, what can we do right now to start practicing these and to start actively walking our path if we haven't already started? The first thing that we can do is seek the correct knowledge or the correct spiritual teaching. I should say wisdom, not knowledge. And this is the right teachings for you because everybody is different. We're not here to say that the Aetherius Society is the one and only way. It's what speaks to you and what the correct teachings for you is going to be. And the second thing that we can do, and you'll find that these match up with King Yoga quite nicely, is practice self-development practices. And these are things like deep breathing, affirmations, mindfulness, discipline. And these kinds of teachings can help us become more in tune with our intuition, but they also give us the space of mind and the patience to continue on our path. And then finally, that will prepare us better to be of greater service.
That's right. As Rodney said at the beginning, I mean, that's the main aspect. Prepare yourself to be of service and then be of service, I think is what the Master Jesus says. And again, just sort of, I mean, I agree with you totally about the right teaching or what's right for myself. I mean, in my own case, I began as a Christian when I was having these, troubling, deeper questions as a young man. And all I knew, having been raised in the Christian church, was the Bible, particularly the New Testament. And I read it and devoured it, even marked it in the book. And, you know, it had a very, very, very deep, profound meaning for me. It still does. But then at the same time, through my employer, I was introduced to a school of Eastern philosophy, which taught karma and reincarnation, which obviously is not, you know, orthodox Christianity. And yet, at the time, I mean, it still does, but I mean, it was something that resonated with me, so I had to look at it. So I think that it's important that, you know, this journey of discovering our true purpose, and certainly, you know, in terms of having the right teaching, follow what feels and just seems right to yourself. It's very important to do that, not because we live in a world that, you know, is very sort of conditioned in so many ways, and it comes back. I mean, bravery can take bravery to step out. It does take bravery to step out of that conditioning.
Absolutely, it does.
And then, yes, it does, with the benefit of spiritual practices, lead on to service, and that is, I mean, I think that's one of the main reasons. So it was, you know, we're in the Aetherius Society because through Dr. George King, not only did he give us these teachings, profound teachings, not only did he give us ancient yogic teachings. I mean, there's nothing new about almost all of the practices that we use. But through his unique contacts with beings from other worlds, which I think, you know, the teachings and the practices enable one to sort of take seriously these cosmic masters, because without investigating those teachings, without the practices, it can all seem very remote and not applying to one's own life, and almost absurd and ridiculous. And one therefore doesn't take the Aetherius Society seriously. But when one does take to these teachings because they resonate deeply, then one realizes that these cosmic beings who spoke through Dr. King are incredibly real and incredibly profound, and at the same time are giving us exceptional and extraordinary ways to be of service to the whole world, to all of humanity, and also to the earth. And we'll get into this in the King Yoga Experience event next month on the subject of why evolution is speeding up, because we are going through profound changes, and it's putting a pressure on all of us. Just, you know, come back to the bumper sticker. If you're not appalled, you haven't been paying attention. I think we need to take this true purpose thing far more seriously than the world does, and I think hopefully there is that kind of awakening going on. Yeah.
And I think it's also important to mention that being of service, it doesn't mean that you're sacrificing all the time and you're, you know, having a miserable life because all you're doing is serving others. I think service, certainly for me, I don't know how everybody else feels, it brings a different kind of fulfillment that I cannot find elsewhere, because you're doing innately what you know you should be doing. You're going along with what your higher self wants you to do, but it also feels good to help people, you know. And every time you make somebody smile, you always feel nice that you made somebody smile. Perhaps not you, Paul.
Well, it can be quite hard to make me smile, but you say that, but I mean, it reminds me of a quote, I suppose, from an Indian poet called Rabindranath Tagore, who actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature about 100 years ago. But you know, something he said. He said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy, and awoke and found that life was service. And behold, I discovered that service was joy. That's
a lovely quote.
That's a nice way of putting it. Well, where are we?
Well, we're just about ready for our third extract now. So this is Dr. King talking about perhaps some challenges that we might come across starting on the spiritual path. And he begins this lecture, this extract, talking about how all of us have this wonderful light within us, but that we kind of hide it under a bushel of distraction and materialism. So that's where we start off on this extract.
Every wrong thought and wrong action we do does just this, and we spend most of our lives doing just this. When all we have to do is to allow our real selves, our true selves, to shine forth, and the bushel would be blown away, and we could shine forth and keep shining forth. Didn't matter what people thought of us, how many friends so-called we lost, because whatever loss we have, we'll have a much, much greater gain. So we lose our so-called friends, and what happens? Other friends come who are real and true and lasting and honest and good. Far greater friends than ever we had before. We might feel our times of loneliness. Before a man gets illumination, he must go through a period of loneliness. We've been through this period. Stark, terrible loneliness. But out of this comes a greater companionship than ever we have experienced before. So we do not lose by this.
I think that's kind of a common story a lot of people have when you get involved in spirituality. You get challenges that come up, and sometimes they're friendships, sometimes you find that people have less in common with you and you are going different paths with people you care about. But challenges happen in all kinds of different ways, but these teachings give us the context to get through these challenges, and the practices give us strength, and the service and all of it gives us a good focus to get through these challenges as best we can and come out, far better on the other side of them. And it also gives us the hindsight view of seeing why these challenges came about, what we learned, and the reason for them.
Yeah, that's there's a saying, I think it's actually in the New Testament, where it says, or maybe probably Jesus says, many are called, but few are chosen. I think we all do have this calling at some point in this prompting to take life, if you like, more seriously. And it is a challenge. And one does have to, as you say, these challenges come up in many different forms, I think just about for everybody. And it's only the few who will actually go through and beyond those challenges. Dr. King, as a great master of yoga, he projected from his body many times, and he would go to the other realms where we go between lives in this whole cycle of reincarnation, coming back each time to remind ourselves of our true purpose for being here. And he speaks, he spoke several times when visiting these other realms of people who are there waiting for the one-eyed turtle to surface through the Yog Vanok so that they can come back, which to use this opportunity that we have here in life. And he says, over and over again, he came across people with regret that, they didn't take spend the time to find out what is my true purpose for being here and have the courage and the determination to find that out. Because really it doesn't actually take that much, and it is the most rewarding journey that we can take. But it does require that initial bravery, which is essential in all things. It's our voice of conscience. I don't know if I have time to about the Gatsby.
Oh yeah.
Can I talk about
I think
Gatsby?
you should talk about
Gatsby. Well, before at school, we had. I was useless at school, but we had to read these books. I was doing English A level, and half of them I didn't read because they were so deadly boring. Even though I had to sit an exam on them without having read them. But there was one book I absolutely loved. And that was The Great Gatsby. And it was the same year that the film came out with Mia Farrow and Robert Redford. And I really loved that book. And to me, life is a bit like one of Gatsby's parties, if you're familiar with the book The Great Gatsby, the great American novel. And because everybody went to Gatsby's parties. Not everybody had a ticket, but they all showed up. Everybody got into, and it's like here on Earth, we're all here. We're all here at Gatsby's party, and it seems like we're here just to have fun, to have a good time. And there's very few who actually sort of even believe that Gatsby exists, like God, does God exist? And there's rumors about Gatsby, that he killed a man or he fixed the World Series and this kind of stuff. But most people aren't that interested or bothered in finding Gatsby. They're just here to try and have a good time and get drunk, and you see this terrible mess after the parties the following morning. But I think we're here to find out if Gatsby exists. We're here to go and find Gatsby, and it's incredibly. Hey, if we want to stop reincarnating, then start looking for Gatsby.
It's a very good analogy. One of the masters who spoke through Dr. King is the Master Jesus, the Master of Love. And in 1958, he gave this wonderful poetic teaching and practice called the 12 Blessings. And each blessing was given on a Sunday and 12 consecutive Sundays. And our next and final extract is an extract from one of these blessings, and I think it's the same quote, actually, that Paul mentioned a bit earlier. So let's listen to our final extract.
O children, control your minds, control your emotions, and walk through silence into silence. Then you will be one with that all-knowledge space which exists within each and every one of you. Then come ye outwards in service. For verily do I say unto thee, that the greatest one in these days is he who sacrifices himself, his bliss, and the whole of his energy for the benefit of his brother. This one is great. Be ye like this. Prepare yourselves, O adorable children. Give yourselves the ability to be of service. And then be of service, so that your brother may be helped through you.
I just really love that extract. I think the Master Jesus has really summed up what we were talking about today. Give yourself the ability to be of service. Find the right spiritual teachings. Be brave. Get out of your comfort zone. Learn to use the energy love, and then be of service. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what is the quote in the Nine Freedoms about it's how when you are of service, the Kundalini will rise in unforced,
natural,
unforced
fashion, and open the chakra jewels in the body. No, I agree. I think it is a wonderful quote. Although he begins by saying, "Control your minds, control your emotions," and that comes back to that sort of that initial step. That at some point, no matter where we are in our life, but having the courage, the urgency, the importance, this prompting, it's incredibly serious. This great gift of life that we have, and taking the time to come to terms with it, address it, face it. It's incredibly revealing. It's incredible. I mean, I remember again in my own case, but I was so happy, even though I was alone as that young man. It was the most inspired period of my life, actually. I was, and it's a bit of a cliche, but literally sort of seeing God in everything. I was filled with delight because I'd found the answer. I'd found the true purpose of life. I'd found the true purpose of life, which is to be who I am. To be, literally to be, in that glorious sense. And, the other thing, the Master Jesus says there is the greatest one in these days is he who sacrifices himself, his bliss, and the whole of his energy. Now that is more difficult, but that is the destination. But
it tells us what we can work towards as well.
Right, and ultimately to become truly free. Coming back to the Nine Freedoms, we probably need to wrap this up. But I mean, one thing that Mile Sector 6 says in I think it's the third freedom, possibly the second, is kill possession. Which is all to do with sort of the solar plexus and fear. Oh, I don't have enough. I need to have this stuff. Actually, the opposite is true. We have everything that we need, but it does. Again, I suppose to bring this back, begins with the bravery, because we have it all. We have everything that we can ever possibly need, and it is taking the time and the trouble to address that inner calling within each of us, and that's our true purpose to be here. Why we're here, to answer that question. You asked me at the beginning. Let's answer it at the end. Our true purpose for being here is to discover who we really are, what we really are, and to live that.
We're going to take a short break before we get into our practice session, but please think of any questions, and if you're online, pop your questions in the chat, and after we have our contemplation, we will answer some of these questions. So we'll take a few minutes break. Thank you. So we're now going to have our practice session. Paul, would you like to introduce it for us?
I'd be delighted to introduce it, Lisa. Thank you very much. Well, by way of introduction anyway. And yes, hopefully this practice will help us all to, no matter where we are on the path, or even if we're at the very beginning, see what our own next step is on this journey that we're all taking individually. We're all taking it alone. Coming back to the loneliness aspect. And I think that I mentioned earlier our next King Yoga Experience event, which is entitled Evolution is Speeding Up, or Why Evolution is Speeding Up. But, I say that, and these two sort of topics go very much hand in hand, because I think, we can all sense that our world is almost spiraling out of control. It's become a very worrisome, troubling, concerning, panicked world on so many different levels. And I mean, I think that you could make a case for that. The reason why that is so is because humanity, on the whole, has not taken the time and the trouble to find out what is my true purpose for being here. Taking life as seriously as life deserves to be taken in that highest and best sense. And so there is not just a growing need, I'd say there's really a compelling need for humanity, every single one of us, to start asking this question: what can I do? What is my real purpose for being here? I mean, there is a danger. One could say of the world literally falling apart and becoming a very scary, hostile place, which is not what it's supposed to be at all. It's supposed to be the very opposite of that, and it will be the very opposite of that, as and when humanity, as individuals, each one of us alone, starts to address this most important question, and a beautiful question. So we're going to try and we're going to do a contemplation in a moment, so that we can go within and just feel within ourselves, within our own heart, our own mind, and perhaps most importantly within our own soul, what our voice of conscience, what our higher self is calling us to do as our next step on this journey. But first, Lisa, you're going to get us prepared.
We'll do my best. Let's all sit comfortably in our chairs with our spine upright but relaxed. And let's just take a few deep breaths. Try to make your in-breath match the length of your out-breath. And just breathe deeply and fully. See all the cares of the day leaving your mind, and your shoulders relax. And with every breath, feel this gentle peace flowing down into you. And breathe in this peace. Breathe in the peace and breathe out any tension until you see yourself completely filled with this gentle peace.
So as we become still in our mind and our body, let us try to feel what our heart is trying to tell us. What our heart knows to be true and right. And feel good with that. Know that that is what is in our highest and best interest at this time. And that it is safe because it is true and right and good. And then let us just begin to see what that would mean. What would be the step we now need to take to put that into motion. What is it calling us to do? In our best and highest interest. And how might that impact others whom we know and love, and who look to us? How can we tell them, if we need to tell them? How can we express this next step with the truth and the love that it demands? Because it is right. And beyond it is a glory. Because it is true. And how would it impact our world? How would it take me forward? To where I need to go? And how this would help those around me. In their own way. And how the world would be helped that much more by taking this step. Of coming into an alignment with my higher self, as God intends. And how would it feel? Does it feel right? Is it good and glorious and beautiful and natural? And how then can I serve? How can I help? By helping myself in this way, how can I help others around me and the world as a whole? By allowing this love to flow through me in this way. What is right for me to do at this time? As my true purpose for being on earth at this time.
Mars Sector 6 says, if you would burn up your lower karma aspects, you would serve. If you would at this moment begin to build tomorrow's temple upon the sure foundations of today's right action, you would serve. If you would be free from the materialistic prison cunningly devised to enslave you, you would serve. If you would be detached from your own petty worries, you would serve. If you would enjoy better health, you would serve. If you would prepare yourselves for the new world, you would serve. Let's slowly open our eyes. Come back into the room. I hope everybody had some really good ideas. It's quite a relaxed space now. I feel a little abrupt speaking, sorry. I think it is time for us to do some questions, take some questions, and hopefully have the answers for them. So.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lisa. So the first question is, why do you think many people do not follow their spiritual nature?
Why do we think many people do not follow their spiritual nature? That was the question.
I think there's an awful lot of distraction in the world, and it's distraction in a way where we are kind of make our focus things, materialistic things. We've got we have bills to pay, and that's a worry if you can't pay your bills. And we have responsibilities, and I think probably a lot of people think they don't have time to be spiritual.
I think you're right, Lisa. I'd agree. In other words, I'd agree with that. The only thing I might add is nasty little four-lettered word beginning with an F, which is fear. Which is fear. I mean, it's fear. It's not having that bravery, that essential bravery to follow what one is being called to do in one's life.
Well,
Any
you
other
very much.
questions? Yeah.
Okay, the second question, which is related to something Lisa said, is how can I live a spiritual life while working, paying rent, etc.?
I think,
You want to have to repeat the question.
oh, sorry, the question is how can I follow the spiritual path when I have to work and have all of these other responsibilities? Well, I think given that our purpose on earth, as we mentioned, is the most important thing that we can, it's why we're here. And I think, I remember one time when I was first looking into Eastern religion, I got this series of meditations sent to me. And the instructions said, meditate on a couple sentences for 30 minutes a day. And if you think you don't have 30 minutes a day, meditate on them for an hour. So I think the truth of it is we do have time. It's even people who work very hard, more than, I know people have busy lives, but it's making it a priority, making our purpose and serving others, making it a priority. It's all well and good to know the next steps you have to take, but then you have to take them.
Yeah, and what I would also add to that is that for those who whose life who are caught up very much in the material world, we all have to be. But perhaps as a consequence of attending this workshop or whatever, thinking, well, I want to ditch that. That's not. I'm on the right, the wrong path. One can't just jump horses midstream or whatever it is, and so yes, if one does feel that one's life is far too caught up in the hecticness of the outside world and not enough time is being spent on one's own inner spiritual journey, and particularly if one is a member of a household, one can't just sort of jump ship and abandon that. Because that would not feel right. That would not be right, nor should it feel right. It would be a process of seeing where I want to go, where I need to go, for myself, for the good of not just myself, but for the good of my whole family. Seeing that next step and doing it with them. Doing it with them because it's truth. If it's the voice of truth, and if it isn't true, and if it isn't the voice of truth, it'll fail anyway because it's not true. It's half, not even half-hearted. So if it's genuine, then see what the next step is. And if you are, as I say, if you do have responsibility with family or whatever it is, whoever it is, honor that. Honor that.
Thank you very much. The next question, which is related with what you said, Paul, is it wrong to spend time with my family, having fun, and helping my children to become good people?
Is it wrong to spend time with my family, having fun, and
helping my children to become good people?
Oh, and helping my children to become good people. No, absolutely not. I mean, life is joy. Rabindranath Tagore was right. I mean, life is joy, and a lot of joy should come, hopefully does come, from being with one's family. No, but it's keeping everything, I suppose, in a balance. And again, it's just coming, it goes back to the intuition, because the intuition already knows what's right. It would be completely wrong to ignore one's family, and totally wrong to not give your children the love that is spontaneous, natural love for one's children, wanting them to be the best, human beings that they can be. So it's a balance.
Yeah, I would agree.
Thank you. The next one will be...
Do we have any questions from our audience?
Yeah.
Where
Oh, yeah.
we were getting all these, any audience questions?
Okay.
No? Good, well.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, what
have a
else you
question.
got there, Rebecca?
I have a question.
Okay, let's hear your question.
So you're talking about truth and intuition, right?
Mm.
How can you enhance those things, those qualities in you?
Well, you can't enhance truth. Go ahead. You're a
Well,
woman.
I think you can. So intuition
Yeah.
question goes to me.
Yeah.
I think the way to become more in tune with your intuition is to practice listening to it. Personally, I have found that doing spiritual practices helps me hear my intuition, but the experience of actually listening to it and taking notice of it is more difficult, because you wonder, am I just thinking that, or is it my intuition? But the practice of listening to it, I think, will help you in time make that voice louder and make it easier to follow. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, so much. I have the following question. Do you think there will be a time when all of humanity will know and share a true purpose on earth?
Yes.
You've got to repeat the question. Do you think
sorry.
there will be a time?
Do you think there will be a time
when all
the-
of humanity
all of humanity
will know and share?
will know and share in their true purpose? Yes.
How far away is it?
I think it's entirely up to us. We know this time will come. There will be a time when the earth that we live on will get to have this wonderful atmosphere without us kind of taking everything we need from her. And how long it takes is entirely up to us. I think, my personal opinion, the way things are in the world, it's bringing it to a head that we all need to really focus on spirituality to help, because it's clear that politics is not working. It's clear that, a lot of man-made things that we've set up aren't working. But
Human-made.
Human-made, excuse me. But I think when we're following a spiritual path, the truth never fails, and the love of God never fails. And so eventually we will get to that point.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. Don't have to, but I'm going to choose to disagree. Not disagree with you, but because when you say it's entirely up to us, and I partly agree with that, but I don't entirely agree with that,
Okay.
because I think that, again, coming back to our next King Yoga, if that's not a plug, why evolution is speeding up. I think there are other cosmic forces and pressures at work that are impacting us, and so it partly is up to us, but at the same time there is this pressure, cosmic pressure, for us to change. It's not a walk in the park and whenever we feel like it, we'll start. It'll come about. No, it's a pressure that's happening. It always has been happening since the beginning of time, but it's increasing. It's intensifying. So, I think that it's how we choose to listen to that and make it happen. But if we don't make it happen, there will be consequences. I mean, coming back to the 12 blessings, there's a line in the 7th blessing, which is a blessing to the Mother Earth, which says, she, the Mother Earth, has not as yet demanded that you change or leave, whatever that may mean. We might get into that, in a later King Yoga experience event. But so it's two-way.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lisa, again. And our last question. I am not a monk. what suggestions do you have to help my spiritual growth?
I am not a monk. What suggestions do you have to enhance my spiritual growth? It's a great question. Get active. Get active in the world. Start doing things right, what we intuitively know to be right. There's a wonderful YouTube motivational speech given by an admiral, McRaven, I think was his, or something like that. And he says that, the first thing when you get up is make your bed. Make your bed, because even if you have a lousy day, at least when you come back, your bed is made, but it sets your intentions off in the right way. You're already doing something constructive, so you don't have to be a monk. Now is not the time to be a monk in that way. Or one can live alone, but one's got to be also, as we know, helping the whole world. There are online services. We do, if you don't live near an organization engaged in spiritual practice, does not have to be the Aetherius Society, but join our online services where we send out prayer almost every day of the week for the upliftment and healing of the world, and you'll find that tremendously beneficial and rewarding.
That was going to be my suggestion as well. I think if you're not sure of what to do, start to pray. And I think in the prayers, whether it's the online services that we have where we practice the 12 blessings or other services that we have, even the praying for truth and what to do, as your example when you were a young boy, that will get you the information that you're looking for. Might take time. It might not happen after your first prayer. But if you pray with your heart and you're serving others, these things will come. And I think that was our last question. So.
Was it our last question?
Oh, one more.
There's one more. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
We have a few minutes.
Okay. So this is from Stanley. And
Stanley?
And I think it's our last question. How do you work on karma entanglement with close ones, such as family or extended family, if you don't plan to come back to Earth for the next life? What do you need to do?
Say goodbye. The question, how do you deal with karma?
Entanglement.
Entanglement with your family members if you're not planning to come back to Earth for another time? Lisa, what would you do to Julian?
Well, I think we're all going somewhere. So this little booklet by Dr. King, Karma and Reincarnation, is quite a good one. And basically it says, if you have loose ends to tied up, or if you have karma that you still need to work through, that means that we do keep coming back. So I think when it's time that we have learned everything we need to learn in this classroom of Earth, we will move on and move on to the next steps in the 9 freedoms.
Well, and you just saying that brings to mind something that was very important for me in those younger years. In fact, I can remember the date. It was Sunday, March the 9th, 1986. It was so important that I wrote it in letters and put it in gold letters. I wrote it in gold letters and put it under a picture of Christ that I had at the head of my bed. Because that, in the early hours of that morning, I'd had a vision, believe it or not, of a being from another world hovering at the side of my bed. And I could see the world from which he'd come. It was radiant, golden world. And my instinct and everything about me was to go to where he had come from. That was my whole yearning and urge in this dream, this vision. And he repeated to me how I do that, how I, just quit this world. And the words actually I wrote, as well as the date, were, "You serve to leave." He repeated this, "You serve to leave. You serve. So I think to leave any situation, whether it's a family situation, a work situation, you must have fully served it, and which severs all the ties, because you've given everything that you can to that situation, and that frees you to leave. So if you fully served everybody and everything here on earth, then no need to come back, perhaps.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Okay.
And that was the last question.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for tuning in online.
Rodney's going to come back.
Okay.
Rodney and I, by the way, speaking of the 12 blessings, those 12 Sundays in 1958,
Yes.
Rodney and I were both born during that 12-week period, were we not, Rodney?
That's very true, and I'm
Yeah.
glad that you haven't left through service yet. I'm glad you're still with us.
Well, thank you.
We're fortunate to have him here today, aren't we, everybody? Let's give our presenters a big round of applause.
Thank you.
And a big round of applause to all the attendees here in the temple, as well as everybody online. Thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And, personally, I have to say, what a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Beautiful from A to Z. It was just a real pleasure to listen and learn and to be part of the presentation. So, I'm being motioned to come a little closer this way, so I'm coming a little closer this way. So,
Good to see you, Rod.
it's great to be here, Paul.
Thank you.
So, having said that, I'd like to invite everybody also to our free follow-up event, which is this coming Sunday. The date is the 19th. Thank you very much, at 3 o'clock. There's a link on the YouTube channel below the screen. You can see a bunch of links there. It's like a whole bunch of links. I encourage you to check all those out, because there's some fantastic information and resources there for all of you to follow up with and discover your true purpose on earth. And I'm very glad that I did as well. And I also would like to, as Paul said, invite everybody to our next King Yoga event next month. That is Saturday, July the 17th, and that is why evolution is speeding up, and it certainly is speeding up. And so, and lastly, to those attendees here, you're all invited to a little social right after this. I wish everybody online could join us as well, but next time, please join us in this temple. We'd love to have you here and be part of this event in person, if you can, and join us in the social afterwards. Until then, we thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you at the follow-up this coming Sunday and at our event next month.
Thank you very much. Thank you.